is Lynn Caswell. Have you ever met
Hi,
Lynn?
Lynn. How are you? I remember your name from something.
Probably from some letters from.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good. And we'll cover that. Get organized here. That's okay. Happens a lot here to me. Just in case I need it. Okay. I think I did everything. Well, thanks for the time. I appreciate it. Especially getting started early. That makes a big difference.
No problem. We were lucky we were able to move some things around and make it so. Yep.
Cool. So, I'm not sure where you'd like to start, if you have a preference. Otherwise, I'll be glad to.
Well, what we talked about, our agenda for today, were the things that you included in your email to Ricker on the 24th.
Okay. And the primary focus of that is getting some simple funding, for example, for an event. We went through this last year. And I still haven't figured out what went wrong with that.
Well, I think we clarified in previous emails, Ken, that money is available when it's available, when it's not, it's not.
Very interesting answer. So thank you for the attempt. But at the same time, Deb, there were other people getting money. So your answer doesn't jive with what?
I wrote the other answer for you, but I understand. We just see it differently. I understand.
So what is the secret to getting sponsorship for activities and events?
We're not doing sponsorships anymore. In fact, excuse me, we have a policy going forward of not doing sponsorships at all. Money is tight enough so that we're not going to be doing that. We have in the past. There's no question about that. But things are.
So what did I do wrong last year? Why was that?
Well,
we went through the series of emails, and I kept getting copies of some form from the Gerontological Society meeting, and that was, and then it was never really explained to me why.
We did address it last year, Ken, and I don't want to go over that again today. We addressed it.
Well,
last year.
let me just talk about not wanting to go over stuff. First of all,
Let me be
there's
clear,
an
Ken,
issue.
I won't go over it.
There is an issue of trust.
Okay, Ken, there may be an issue of trust. I understand that from your emails. But we've talked about what happened last year, why we could or couldn't support what you had requested. That's a closed book. But we can talk about what you wanted to talk about today, which was some new requests.
Well, you just answered the question. There is no funding.
I can't judge from what you have written here exactly what you're looking for, what the dates are. As you recall, Ken, in Ricker's email, he talked about as we go forward if there may be opportunities that we may see coming, depending on what these are. From one-liners, I can't tell, but I respect you enough to listen to what you have to say.
So you've seen the list. What do you have questions about? A monthly speakers forum is pretty straightforward. Every month we have a meeting and we have a speaker, and it's about dementia. It's about creating awareness and educating people about dementia. Our biggest fees for that are in some cases speaker fees. Last year I was trying to get some support or earlier this year for the 90+ study and bringing one of their specialists here to Maine to speak, which we did. But you folks kind of declined any support for that effort. Well, I would think bringing a national speaker to Maine in any case would be a worthwhile cause. Is there any support for that going forward, or is there any support possible for an educational forum on a monthly basis?
For as far as forums, we don't do sponsorships. That would be off the table.
Whatever terminology you want to use, feel free to use that.
I will feel free, thank you. As far as the speakers forum, tell me specifically, do you have something in particular in mind, and do you have dates I mean, you said travel, did I hear you say that earlier? You wanted to bring in speakers?
We paid out, for the 90-plus study last year, we paid out $2,500 out of our own pocket.
Sure.
It would have been nice to have some support for the travel to bring
But going forward, we
Dana.
discussed the past, but going forward.
I'm using last year as an example so we can judge what going
Sure.
forward if we find a speaker, which there are some very interesting speakers. I would like to know what kind of support might be available. So we meet the first Thursday of every month, 4:30 at Port Resources, and we arrange a speaker for each month based on what's interesting and who's doing what to whom, and we plan that about a month, maybe a little more ahead of time. If we knew that there was going to be resources available, we would bring in a national speaker, but for the most part, it's local speakers.
And what's your audience?
Our audience is fairly limited because we don't have a lot of money for signs and publicity. So our audience is somewhat limited, but we're reaching Cumberland County, York County areas who we're reaching out to, and we have attendance anywhere from 6 to 16.
6 to 16 in any given month?
On any given month, and I think that should easily be in the 50 range if we had the right resources to publicize it.
What is your current fund? Where does your current funding come from?
Donations, we did get one grant last year from the Alzheimer's Foundation, and out of my pocket.
Okay.
Donations, and you got a grant from Alzheimer's, you said?
Alzheimer's Foundation.
Have you applied to any other
Yes.
grant sources like John T. Gorman? I know it's
Yep.
and it hasn't been successful.
No,
Okay.
no.
The reason I'm asking is I work with some of our other nonprofit providers, and a lot of what they do is funded through grants because
I've
the
applied
state-
for 10 grants, got
Yeah,
none.
it's hard, but
A lot of competition.
yeah, there's a lot of competition. But some providers are better at it than others, and sometimes I have to encourage providers, but it sounds like you already know about grants, so.
I'm very familiar with
Yeah.
grants.
And did you apply to the Alzheimer's Foundation again?
They only allow one grant per year,
Yeah.
and so that's not due until later this year, and that they won't do that type of funding again. They only do one program once. So for next year, it'd have to be for a different purpose.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Today, I'm not certain of anything, and I don't know if you are, Lynn, that I'm aware of that would support travel, and because we can't sponsor, as I said.
Travel, speakers fees, I mean, we paid $1,500 for travel and lodging, and another $1,000 for speaker fees, and getting arrangements made for holding it at 2 different locations. So the total package was $2,500. So speaker fees, certainly advertising is another cost which is just exorbitant and is well beyond our budget, so we have to rely on PSAs and word of mouth, and word of mouth depends a lot on the organizations who are supporting it.
Usually when we, not the long-standing kind of sponsorship stuff, but you're right that that we have in the past had grants where some kind of public forum is part of the grant, and I just don't. So that's, if there was a new grant.
So rather than me guessing,
Right.
why don't you tell me what grants might be available?
See, that's the thing.
That's
We
where.
don't, that's the thing, we don't have, it's new grants. That new grant opportunities are generally when the department or some outside nonprofit might come to us and say, look, there's a grant, we really have these great ideas, would you like to, you department, let's partner, let's do something. When that's generally, and those grants usually last for 3 years, at least. So, but those are set up, goes to the feds, they say, yep, you can do that. And then we're kind of limited, okay, here are our partners, here's what we do. And I think part of the problem that right now is the department, the office, does not have, at least I haven't seen any new grant opportunities that would lead us, department, to be able to say, okay, here's one on dementia or caregiving or Alzheimer's. Let's see what the Memory Cafe, how it can be tied in so that we can support you for, a few years. That's really where.
That's part of the reason we'll meet with you, it's a good point, Lynn, is because we're scanning all the time looking for something that makes good sense and that we know someone's interested in doing.
Right.
And the more education we have about that, when we see an opportunity, we can put the pieces together. And that's why we're, you want us to
But
tell you.
that's not what has happened in the past, so what has changed?
What do you mean what has changed?
Because I've looked to partner with you folks on several things in the
We
past.
have to be at the right time in that process, just as Lynn described. We have to be at the start of a process so that it's clear that will dovetail into whatever is being requested in the grant, which we don't control what's requested.
And part of it is not everyone who's interested, when a grant comes and we're talking, we have stakeholders, there's a limited amount of funding, the feds might have a limited scope, so there has to be some decision on, okay, these people over here can do this, and the feds want that, so we'll partner with them. So there is some.
Sounds like the MedCats grant.
Could be, that's one example, there are a lot of them.
But another thing I just want to say is if you hear of grants that you think your organization could apply to, it wouldn't hurt to come to us and say, hey, I want to apply to this. Because a lot of times grant funders will say, oh, he's got OADS behind him, a letter of support.
I did that.
Yeah. Ricker just wrote a letter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, he provided it late, so it didn't get in. So they won't accept it.
That's unfortunate. So, okay, so speakers forum, and you're interested both in the speakers fee and advertising. And do you have a ballpark on what that is for such an event for you, Ken?
Last year I provided some information on specifically the 90+ study and trying to get that here. This year there are a couple potential large speakers, but on a monthly basis we're talking $150 on a monthly basis to get the word out. We've had various specialists from the Southern Maine area come and talk about their programs and
The Area Agency on Aging?
they're coming next month.
Okay. So
Certainly
it's about 150 per.
that's what we're looking for.
Okay.
And do you have memory cafes? They're not physical locations. It's the concept of we get together. You don't have physical locations.
We hold them at physical locations, but yeah, no, I don't have physical buildings or plan or rent or anything. No, but these are donated spaces.
Right. No, that's yeah. I just wanted to ask that question.
But they're the same space every month. So.
Right. Okay.
They're once a month for 2 hours at a given location, and we now do 17. So that's growing in number. We actually have one in Augusta now.
That's excellent. Where's your Augusta one?
Mary Chase Smith House. Is that the right place? The VOANNE.
Oh, there's one over by the
Margaret
Legion?
Chase. Margaret Chase Smith.
Margaret Chase Smith? Oh, great.
Yeah. That's on Winthrop Street. Is it a long gray building? Anyways, it doesn't matter.
It's down by Lowe's.
Oh yeah, no, I don't know what it is. That's
Oh,
okay.
by Lowe's. Oh,
Yeah.
I guess I wasn't thinking the right place.
Yeah, I was thinking someplace else, but that's still.
Good. Do you have good attendance here in Augusta?
Well, it's mostly internal right now because we haven't really promoted the outside yet. It's a matter of getting people comfortable, but they certainly enjoy. You know, the thing about, I don't know if how much you paid attention to some of the low-income elderly housing, but that's where half the people with early-stage dementia are. And they don't dare say they have dementia because then they probably have to move out and there's no place to move them to.
Or they don't want to go where they could be moved.
Well, I mean, if they need services, there's just no place for main care patients to go. There's no room out there. There's a long list as far as I understand. So that's one of the events that we do on a monthly basis is the Speakers Forum at Port Resources. They're nice enough to provide the space and the refreshments, and
I think you and I were on the phone together with Karen. Was it Karen?
Karen, yes.
Yeah. Very nice lady.
Port Resources?
Yeah, they work mostly with DD patients, but they're interested in getting into the senior care too, because they're really close, and some of the things they do are very close to what seniors with dementia need.
You know, the fact that you're charged for speakers, really, I mean, it amazes.
Wait a minute, we got charged for the speaker from the 90+ study because that's bringing her from California. But on a monthly, the 150, it wasn't for speakers, it was for the advertising.
Yeah, okay.
So,
Good.
you know, careful about drawing assumptions because
No,
that is not the case.
Okay,
For the most part. If somebody were to ask, I would probably not invite them to go, like a doctor or somebody like that. But from out of state, you sort of have to figure
you do have to pay.
And in the 90+ studies case, you know, that was a research assistant who was being pulled away from the study for publicity's sake. And we had a pretty good turnout. It would have been better if we'd had the chance to spend some money on advertising or to offset at least some of the cost of the travel.
How many people came?
Well, we had 2 locations, so somewhere in Falmouth there was about 100, and in South Portland was more like 25, so different times of day. But Falmouth at Ocean View, they were very helpful, and they spent some of their money on advertising, so
What's
that helped.
the best time of day to get a good crowd for that, Ken?
I don't think anyone knows the secret to that.
No.
I don't think anyone knows the secret to that. It is very. I know we did the one in Falmouth at noontime, thinking people would get away at lunch and stuff, and I think Christine was going to come to that, but she didn't show. So.
I know she went down this spring to a couple of the memory cafes. I don't recall where. I don't know if you saw her there.
She'd go to memory cafes, but we're not talking memory cafes right now.
Right, yeah, I know, but I am. She went down a couple of times. She's very interested and said there was a really lovely atmosphere.
It is a very, Senator Collins' office has been to a couple of memory cafes and is very, very interested in the concept. Of course, we're trying to get it adopted nationally, and we're creating a national organization for memory cafes with the help of Medici Global. They're working on trying to bring many diverse memory cafe founders together.
It has its seats in Europe, doesn't it?
It does. It does.
Medici, that's it.
Well, Medici's an Italian firm, but they're mostly associated with finding clients for research projects. You know, the subjects for the Alzheimer's study, which they did recently in Bangor and Portland. But somehow they got connected with a gal out in Arizona who does a memory cafe, and she suggested that they should try using the memory cafes because, I don't know if you're aware, but something like 70% of drug trials fall to the wayside because they can't get enough participants. And the theory is that Maine has such a big population, we should be able to provide all the patients they need for trials. Unfortunately, Maine's not as well organized as they could be to make sure that happens. So that the Speakers Forum is important because it's something I think there's a strong need for education. A strong need for education in all sectors. I think even people who provide care to people with dementia are not well versed in the basics at any cost. And from what I'm hearing from people who visit the Memory Cafe, they wish there were more sources for information, even beyond Savvy, which I understand that, you know, that's a program that's out there, but people often call me and say, well, now what? Because Savvy's a limited time program. So the memory cafes end up catching the people after they graduate from that program. And unfortunately, I'm not sure if you're aware, but you should be, that the Alzheimer's Association doesn't support or help in any way, doesn't make referrals to our program at all.
Now, is that just here in Maine because you got a grant from the foundation?
Alzheimer's Foundation is a whole different organization.
Yes, but I wonder if they gave, why don't they?
The Alzheimer's Association, you'd have to ask Lori that, because she's just refused to acknowledge that the memory cafes are viable. She tends to want to make them into some sort of a medical thing, and in fact they're just a chance to go out to coffee with other people who have dementia. That's their problem. Other Alzheimer's chapters do support memory cafes, so that's just an issue with Lori until she figures out. They also don't support memory screenings, community memory screenings, which is another program we'd like to get some help with getting it rolled out.
Oh, is that on your list too?
No. No, I think,
So
as I
memory-
indicated, this isn't an all-inclusive list.
Memory screenings, and what does that mean for you?
Well, the Alzheimer's Foundation has a program where they provide all the materials. You just have to provide the nurse or the social worker to offer the testing. And they've got two formats. One is an annual one, because National Memory Screening Week is the 1st through the 7th of November. And then there's what they call the community memory screenings, which are on a regular basis, probably more like quarterly or monthly. But we'd like to implement at least the one during the annual memory screening week. We're working to try to, as best as possible, connect with the facilities and ask them to set aside a day to do memory screenings once a quarter at least.
And when you say facilities, you mean?
Assisted living facilities, any place that has an RN that they could loan us for a day.
Oh, okay,
And
yeah. So you pick them because they already have the trained staff, as opposed to like the elder housing wouldn't have a nurse on staff.
Well, some do actually.
They do?
Yeah, some of the, I was down at Mayflower Place in Sanford the other day, and they have a nurse's station, so they have a nurse who's there most of the time. And trust me, half their people know how they would do on the screening, so they probably wouldn't want to take it. But yeah, there are a lot of places. Any place that has the resources, potentially. The problem is getting the word out and finding the resources to hire somebody or get somebody to do that. It's been a challenge. Volunteers generally want to do something with patients, not clerical administrative stuff, and so the administrative stuff all falls on my shoulders.
So the primary need then is an administrative need for the memory screening?
Yeah, somebody to set them up and then follow up. Somebody to reach out and, somebody part-time who could, it's more like seasonal, so that you could get them set up and then they should pretty much run themselves. But it's a free program. The Alzheimer's Foundation pays for the materials. They use a screening tool, and I'm not sure if it's the MOCA or one of those screening tools. And you provide the staff to monitor the testing. Park Danforth did it last year, and they had 40 people show up, which was outstanding, remarkable. But we also were able to get the City of Portland to declare that the day we did it was declared as Memory Screening Day in Portland. We're hoping we can get the governor to declare a Memory Screening Week, just like the National does. And so that's something I've got to work on, but that's easy.
It's 1st of November, you said?
Yeah, so it's got to happen pretty soon.
Right.
But a declaration is not as complicated as legislation, and
No.
hopefully he won't veto it. So that's another thing that we're trying to put in place. I don't know, moving on, I don't know if there's any resources for research in Maine. I don't know if there are grants that Maine can get for research. I don't know if there's anyone interested in doing research on cognition in Maine, but
Have you spoken to the colleges, UMO, University of New England? You know, they have a geriatric center pretty active up there. University of New England, they do some significant work with aging.
yeah, they do,
contact with them?
but research, I'm not.
I think UMO in their geriatric work does research.
Yeah, I haven't reached out to UMO. They're just too far for me to
Yeah.
focus. But
Len Kay
yeah.
is the head of that program, and I was at a symposium in the spring. I don't recall which month, but they talked about a great deal of research they're doing there, and it looked to me like they were investing more.
Mhm.
They were amping it up from what it had been in the past.
well, we're gearing up to do a couple of small research, what I call what is often referred to as citizen science, related to gut bacteria, microbiomes, probiotics.
Mhm.
There's been a lot of literature recently about the potential impact of selected gut bacteria on cognition. And so we're looking at possibly doing some sort of testing, then providing supplements for specific gut bacteria, and then see if there's testing afterwards, if there's been a change. So that's one small project. And then we're doing another one with, there's been articles recently on the impact of roots and other such quackery to see if there's any impact. For example, ginger is known to have certain health impacts on weight loss, and curcumin and turmeric are known to have impact on cognition. But nobody has any, I've never seen anything that supported that in hardcore science, so before I suggest to people that they should try it, I'd like to try it and see if it has any real impact. The problem I see a lot at the memory cafes is people come and say, like I said earlier, what now? I mean, what can I do? Do I just sit and wait for this thing to end? And, you know, people really want to do stuff, so they're reaching out on their own. And they're reaching out to these, what do you call them? Not naturalists, homeopathic
Right.
people, and people who are not necessarily scientists, and they're reaching out and they're spending a lot of money on things which I'm not sure are beneficial. So I've started doing some reading, and I said, you know, the only way to know is to try it and see what happens, and is there really any impact or not?
Yeah, I mean, I really would, when you have the research, for us, we would always think about the university.
Well, I'm thinking about maybe trying to see if Dr. Donahue might be willing to partner, because I'm not as fond of, the trouble with dealing with the university is they want to take over. And that's not my style. That's just not the way I work. I'm not about to go in with a good idea and then let them run with it. I want to run with it, I want to work with it, I want to be there and stuff. And that's the problem I've had with big organizations. They all just seem to want to take over. And that's not the situation elsewhere. I mean, I'm in communication with a study out in California about patient navigators for dementia, and I said, you know, do you mind if we kind of tag into that? If we get some funding, can we do some evaluation here in Maine about the patient navigator concept? And they said, sure, you know, we'll send you the paperwork and blah blah blah. So there's not this effort to take over, and I just find that to be counterproductive here in Maine. And so that has been my experience with UNE specifically, and I think USM too, on some of their analyses. Len K, I don't know. I haven't talked to Len about this.
They have a growing program, and I think it might be very well worthwhile.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not impressed with their programs, but that's a different issue. It takes a lot to impress me. So the other stuff that I'm interested in is developing technology that will benefit seniors. And in particular, the Amazon Echo, which is a voice-activated device. And I'm actually doing a demo of that next month, or in September here, at one of the cafes in Saco, the Paul Hazelden House. I'm going to do a demo of it because it's all voice-controlled and it does a lot of things, including calling bingo games, which some seniors are very interested in, believe it or not.
The Amazon Echo device calls bingo?
It will call bingo. It has a bingo app, believe it or not. But it's all voice controlled and you can access a lot of music, news, has a psychic function and a horoscope function and stuff, you know, some oddball things like that. But there are some serious apps that are available, or that could be available if we could hire a programmer to do it. The one I want to focus on most, I think other people have heard me mention this, is a program to help manage prescriptions. And the ultimate, or the basic, the fundamental of it would be that you get a prescription and you program the Echo to remind you every day. Let's say you have to take a Prozac at 7 p.m. every day. It would sound its alarm. It has a built-in alarm function, and verbally say, you know, it's time for your Prozac at 7 o'clock.
I know.
And yeah,
it can beep and people won't remember why. Yeah. So the verbal.
Yep. Yeah, and it'll say, you know, it's time to take your Prozac or whatever it is, and set up an alarm for each medication, and it can be persistent to the point where it won't shut off until you actually have acknowledged that you've taken those meds. To add to that, though, I would love to, again, it's a very simple interface to have the doctor's office be able to set up the schedule when they order a prescription and actually send an email to the Echo that would automatically translate into its calendar of reminders.
Have you been in touch with Amazon?
I have applied for a tech grant from Amazon.
Good. I would think they would be quite interested.
They're not at all interested in the seniors, to be honest with you. I've been talking to them for 9 months. That's not their audience. At least they don't think it is.
Well, hopefully they'll change because the baby boomers are big.
But
you know, it's a big group.
They sell an awful lot of stuff to people, younger kids.
There are, when you mention these apps, well anyways, I have heard other types of technology and other entrepreneurs that have created technology that's really focused on elders. And the ones I'm familiar with are all about elder abuse and not about this kind of stuff. So it would be interesting to find out if there's, somewhere else that.
This one I'm pretty sure it doesn't exist yet. I've been actually reaching out to like Rite Aid and some other pharmacy companies to see if they would be interested. Their thinking is that, well, that's for somebody else to develop, and we'll just participate, because one of the other offshoots of having that app would be that it could, when you're running low, it would automatically reorder from the pharmacy, and you'd get a call out of the blue saying your medication has been filled and come pick it up. So I'm reaching out to to anybody who is interested, but what I don't know is if there's any money on the table for technology for dementia specifically, although this isn't just a dementia app. This would certainly apply to any senior
I haven't seen anything on technology. I don't know if you have.
No, I haven't. I mean, I know people who have the little things that beep at them,
Yes.
but that's how I know they don't know what they're supposed to do now, because
Right.
it doesn't talk to them.
Right.
So
So that's something I'm very interested in pursuing, and my theory is that it would be a patentable app, which means that there would be some revenue generated from the sale of the app, and that revenue would be designated to pay for dementia-related
Sure.
right.
Great
costs,
idea, yeah.
programs, whatever. So that's I think a real hot topic, not just for the prescription issue, but I think any reminders that seniors get. For $179 and a wireless connection, you get this access to this thing which is constantly being updated. I mean, they literally, it sits on the cloud, and Amazon changes the programming, and you don't have to sit there and download something on your computer and install it. It actually is all run from the cloud, so you never have to worry about, you know, pushing buttons or blue screens or whatever. Perfect for seniors in that sense. So that's how, if you hear of anything, I've got to imagine somewhere there's funds for technology for seniors. I just don't know where.
Well, that's another reason why, although you haven't had good luck with the university system, the symposium that I went to, they talked a lot about technology.
Yeah.
And the work that they're doing there at UMO. So I would really encourage you to get in touch. They'll be plugged into the kind of grant that you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure they're out there, but we don't see them.
Yeah, I'm trying to work with MTI, Maine Technology Institute, and they have somebody from NIH coming this month, I think. And so I want to tackle that person and hold him down until he promised me some money. So that's just a roundabout approach. But that's, you know, I'm always scanning the NIH and the NIA and its subsidiary websites for grants, new grants and stuff like that. And I literally belong to Grant Station and Maine philanthropy folks and all that stuff, so I'm always checking
You know more about
grants.
grants than we do then.
It's for me though. I mean, I'm pretty much at my limits as far as what I can do as far as writing grants. I mean, I have my limitations because of my memory issues, and so you know, I wish I could do full capacity, but I can't.
Sure.
Moving on a little bit in this discussion, I was hoping next year, because it's too late this year, to do another major conference. I don't know if you're aware, but in 2013 I did hosted a conference in Portland on the economics of aging in Maine.
And how many did you have attend?
We only had 45 people attend, unfortunately. But we had, I think, 10 vendors who showed up, and they helped with the cost of it. And we had national speakers. We had one person from Texas came in and talked about the changes in spending habits that people go through when they retire.
Mm-hmm.
A very interesting analysis. I think she was the only one who's ever done that analysis that I could find on the internet. But I think it's a critical one for businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, the Portland Chamber, I couldn't get them interested in that concept. They won't budge on this aging thing.
And when you said interested in the concept of
The whole aging issue, this silver tsunami, which is what I call it.
Right.
Some people seem to be sensitive about that, but it's going to impact businesses substantially in that retired people don't buy as many cars. They don't buy new tractors. They don't buy new lawnmowers. They don't buy new appliances. They don't buy...
Do you follow the Maine Council on Aging?
I do.
Because
Well, have you ever read their planning document?
I have, and
The 4 pages?
I go to a couple of their, I participate in 2 of their subcommittees. and I go to their,
Have you read pages 1 through 4 of their planning document?
I have.
The one that basically says if it doesn't have their signature on it, you don't get it?
oh, well,
That's a different story.
no,
That's an ethical issue. I mean, I don't know why anyone would belong to an organization that wants to have that much control.
Well, actually, the state does not belong.
I know.
Because we don't pay, but doesn't mean we don't sit at the table. The reason I mentioned it is because I know that they're engaging businesses, the big businesses in Maine, and around the issue of, so the economy is gonna change. You don't have young workers, what are your thoughts on how you're gonna survive? It's not the same as you're talking about, which is the spending habits change. It's not the car dealerships, it's the CMPs anyways, I was just gonna mention that they're having their annual meeting on September 15th, I think it
It
is.
is September 15th.
The conference.
Yeah.
The Portland Chamber is a significant piece of that business population, and if the Chamber doesn't get behind it in Portland area and South, then you don't get the support of the businesses, Portland and South. They need to come out and make a statement. They have that much power.
Wow.
Chris Hall is a very powerful political voice. And his biggest issue is he doesn't trust AARP, which is, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the entire history of MCOA, but their documents of action are based on AARP plans. And so no, I haven't paid a lot of attention to MCOA. They're there. I'm not sure what they're doing completely. I have a pretty good sense, though. And I wonder where they're going to get the funding to do it. That's all I know. So I think you have to address the funding somewhere along the way. But I was
Still, it's membership, isn't it? Mm-hmm. That's what I thought.
well, their operations are it's like a $400 or $500 a year for members, but that doesn't cover all the plans for elder-friendly communities. There's money that's going to.
Well, I don't think the Maine Council on Aging is going to be funding. I think
No.
they're a creative body trying to
Stimulate.
others to collaborate and address issues. Yeah.
But their approach is, let's design it and then we'll worry about funding it later. My approach is, let's design it within the existing available funds. And so, for example, they wanted me to turn over my memory cafes to them to use as a focus group for dementia. And I thought that was just a little bit outrageous. You don't turn over seniors unaware for somebody else to use. And I just thought that was, and when I rejected the notion, I was told I was what was the term they used? It wasn't a very friendly term. But even the whole issue of discussing money was really revolting to them, and I got.
Did you go to them for funding? Had you gone to them?
No, not at all. They were talking to me about using my memory cafes, and I said, well, all your planning is based on where are you going to get the money to do all these things you're telling people in Kennebunk, for example, that they're going to have this great downtown and it's like it's going to come out of the air and it's going to be all paid for and all that stuff. Well, that's not true. We know that the taxpayers are going to pay for that somewhere down the road, but they're not bothering to mention that to people. And so when I said you really need to factor money into this planning process, oh no, we can't do that. Sabotage. They said you'd be sabotaging the system if you did that. That was the word that was used. And so I don't have much respect for that organization and their approach. I don't care how creative they are. I don't think they're half as creative as they think they are, because they aren't, as far as I can see, making a difference yet. Mm-hmm. They've been at this for 2 years. I don't see how they're going to make a difference unless they get more government money, which is going to come out of your budget.
No, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, I think you'll find that they're counting on government money to make that happen.
I don't know.
Not that we've heard.
Yeah.
But I think it's terribly wrong. In their planning document, they say that basically they are going to be the voice for aging in Maine, and that
Yeah.
if you don't get their sign off, that you won't have any shot at it. And I think,
Lofty goals.
Right.
well, this is a core document to their
Yeah.
philosophy moving forward, and I think
So
it's.
many organizations have lofty goals, but we're kind of immune, aren't we?
Right, yeah. We sit at the table with a lot of people who say it's our way or no way. And I think to do our job, we have to sit with people that, and find the common ground and take it from there and try and leave the rest. Can I just, you said something earlier, and I just want to, because I deal a lot with the process of the state. When we do partner with people, you had mentioned that you sound like an entrepreneur. You have ideas, and they're very tied to who you are. And so having other people come in and take them over is something that you don't like. I just want to put out there that when the state contracts with people and gives them money, there are a lot of oversight, measurables, requirements. It may feel like to you that that's the state, and I just want to put that out
No,
there
I
so
mean,
that if
that's
we get
different.
to that point.
That's not what the takeover is about. I mean, providing feedback on and measuring progress is a normal part of that.
Yeah, we're
But-
usually a little bit more. We're very, you have to do, the requirement now is very, you're going to spell out everything you're going to do. And I just want to, if we get to the point where there's going to be a collaborative process,
Yep.
It's very frustrating for us, let alone for someone who's very entrepreneurial. So just wanted to give you a heads up on that.
So just so you know, my background is as a CPA. I was the director of accounting for 6 years, very early in my career, and I handled about 250 research grants at any one time. So I'm very familiar with what grants are about and all the requirements and stipulations. What I would hope wouldn't happen is that if I say, well, we're going to research gut bacteria, that you would then say, well, you've got to do it this way and that way, as opposed to saying, well, you've got to report your measurements of success. There's two different issues.
Right.
And if you're going to tell me how to do the research and take on that role, that's a different story. But I'm collaborating with a lot of people on a lot of different things. Collaboration is not an issue.
Right.
It's some people seem to think that it has to, because there's money attached, that they have to do it their way or not at all. And if that's a sacrifice I'd have to make to get money, then I probably wouldn't do it. But providing feedback and measurements and stuff, that's no problem. That's part of every grant that comes with the dirt.
Currently, the state is it's more what you said, it's the telling you how to do your job. And that's from the governor's office down. So that's, maybe in a few years the pendulum will swing back.
That's not what I saw with MedCap's grant.
So that was before. They change things, I swear to God, on a weekly basis. And the current contracting is very much, so how many days exactly does your provider have to respond to this?
That's not a problem, though. See, again, you're not telling me how to do the work.
Okay.
You're not telling me that I have to use yellow crayons instead of red. You're saying, just report to us whether it was yellow or red and what the results were.
Mm-hmm.
That's different. That's
Okay.
meeting goals and objectives, no problem.
Lynn's just trying to give you, if we should find the money, the way that the current environment is.
Yeah.
I understand.
And so we're not at that bridge, so we don't need to worry about it.
So other things that you have, Ken, that you wanted to talk about for ideas that we can be scanning, looking for opportunities?
Wow, where do I even begin?
Well, we were developing apps and we've done testing. Okay, for table and administration?
Well, if
Admission
you're not
and
doing
travel.
sponsorships, then that's not going to work.
Okay.
You don't have any money to give out. I don't have any resources at all to attend conferences. or if I do spend money on conferences, it's something taken away from other things which I think are more important. But if there was ever any grant funding or anybody with funding, I'd be interested in taking advantage of that. But that's a sort of a peripheral issue. I mean, that's a decision of how I spend money, not. Then it would be easier if I didn't have to borrow or steal all the time.
Sure.
I don't steal. So, I mean, there's a lot of other things that we're doing. I think the ones that are most visible would be the community memory screenings would be a real plus. The Speakers Forum is, I think, something that needs to be expanded. And we're working right now actually with home health visiting nurses to try to create another Speakers Forum in York County. Because again, from the patient on up, there's just a terrible lack of knowledge and understanding about dementia. A lot of people understand aging pretty well, but dementia is a foreign subject to most people, and not understanding communication and stuff like that. They can wipe their bottom and sweep their floor or whatever, but when it comes to actually understanding communication issues, which, by the way, the Amazon Echo has a tremendous capability to take scrambled words and interpret them as you tell it to.
Wow.
So that's one thing I want to experiment with. Is I've got one guest who has trouble enunciating, and I want to see if the Echo can be taught to recognize her poorly enunciated words as what they really are. I think it has that ability, but I'll experiment with that. Education is so big. We've got to find a way to educate doctors. I know the thing that Dr. Begins with R. Renfrew did up in Augusta was good, but it was in Augusta, and so we didn't get the Portland crowd. And I need to figure a way. I did.
Yeah.
I'd love to see more of that happening. Important educational seminars which have certainly credit hours associated with it would be good. I don't have the resources to do that. I can just advocate for it, but I think there is a strong need.
Have you been in touch with Portland Hospital?
Maine Med? I've talked to them a little bit. I probably am not talking to the right people, but I've tried to reach out to them. I think we're too small. That's why I'm going through HHVN, is because they are a subsidiary of Maine Health.
Oh, they go.
Yeah.
So then maybe they are the right people.
And so I'm working my way back up through that way. Same thing with Mercy, the visiting nurses VNA.
Yeah.
Work my way back up through there. So yeah, I mean, it's just a longer process when you have to do it that way than otherwise. But I think there's a huge need for education, and I'll be honest, it's not just in dementia or aging or anything else. I think there used to be in southern Maine the Cumberland County Medical Association. I don't know if you remember hearing of that, but it sort of disbanded in the 80s. But it was a group. It was actually most, if not all, of the doctors in Cumberland and some in York County got together once a month over dinner with a 4-hour meeting where each of the specialties would address the gathering about what's latest and greatest. It was a great tool for communicating new things or changes, and I don't know why it disappeared. But it used to be an incredible thing. Why they don't do that? I think they should start it again, and if I had the resources, I would do that. I would pull that together. We've got places, we've got people, certainly you invite them for a free dinner, and they're more likely to come over. And I know doctors want it. I talked to my own doctor. He's in an office with 3 other people, and I said, well, what kind of training have you had on dementia? said, well, we had a salesperson come in a few months back, and they were selling what do you call it? Not a drug. What do you call it? Alternative form of medication. It was an herbal-based thing. And they said, that's the only thing we've heard in the past 3 years about dementia, that it was supposed to help dementia. Well, they obviously can't prescribe it, so it didn't do them any good.
Right.
So I'm not sure why they aren't getting more education in that sense, but I know if I had the resources, I would be banging on their door. I would be stuffing their envelopes with information every day.
Sure. You know, these days most doctors are associated with a large medical organization. I've heard just primarily the hospital. So you're trying to get to the hospital folks, I think is the best route. There are very few independents anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true to some extent, yeah.
And they might be getting all of their education on that hospital or the hospital associations.
I know they have increasing billing limits that they're chasing underneath, and perhaps that's, you know, inhibiting the education as well.
Having worked at Maine Med, I have a very strong piece of history on that, but they used to do a lot of internal education. And actually weekly would have a staff meeting, but at present it only includes their department heads, so they don't really have a good, strong internal education
Do you
program.
have any old contacts from back in those days?
I'm working on it. Well, most of them are in the grave, so, because most of them were older than I was. I was only 33 when I was there, so it's been a while. I do have a couple. But none of them. Dr. Larnard, who was the chief of medicine when I was there, is still around, but he's tied up with, what's that place in Cape Elizabeth? The real ritzy senior place, Piper Shores. Yeah. So one other thing I wanted to touch upon, I want to renew my Freedom of Information request for the MedCaps grant, and I really would like to have it addressed in a more realistic way. When I say more realistic way, the pricing that was given to me, the $1,335. You know, I know you folks do this. Other agencies do it too. But for example, the quote included a big chunk of money for copies, quote unquote, of every payment made by or for the Office of Aging and Disability Services. I never asked for copies.
So they're not something that the reason...
I asked specifically for a list of all payments.
Right.
A list is a piece of cake. It
No,
doesn't take 40 hours to put together a list. No, it doesn't. I've worked with systems. It's an accounts payable system. You folks write checks and based on...
Well, first of all, let's go to, are you going to renew your FOIA request? Is there a process for that? Right.
You can renew it, and I will tell you, absolutely.
I'll just rewrite it again.
Renew it,
Yeah.
but the response is going to be the same. We worked very hard, I know this because I'm the one who sat down with people, and let me just finish, and asked them how long it would take. I got very specific.
How long it would take on copies or a list?
Collecting the information.
A list of payments.
Mr. Capon, I was very clear when I met with these people. They were supposed to give me the rock bottom time, because I took
For what?
seriously.
Because you refer to it in the time calculation as copies. I don't want copies. So you asked them for the time it would take to get copies of all payments. A list of all payments is available every day, every week, from the accounts payable system here at DHHS. You have a list of all invoices that you pay every day.
They have to go through. So the department, the Office of Aging and Disability Services has a budget of $50 million a year.
And a list of that is readily available on the
No, it's
computer.
not. I can tell you, it is not readily available.
This isn't a point though today we're gonna argue about. I would encourage you, if you want to renew your request, that you should, you have every right to, and then we will respond.
Well, if I'm just gonna get the same response, then obviously there's no need to do that. Now, the recommendation that was given to me was to go to the Attorney General's office and let them hash this out.
I need to do
But-
what you have to do, and you should.
But I wanted to, before, that's not good. Come on, you know, transparency is not a big deal. Everybody wants transparency. So asking for a list, and don't tell me that they're gonna spend 45 hours pulling together a list. Because that's just, I know systems really well.
And I absolutely believe you do know systems
I
very
know
well, given-
systems
but
very
what-
well,
but
and there's
the
no
issue-
way it would cost $1,335 to pull together what I asked for.
You may disagree with what was presented, but we would encourage you, if you want to review it, you should. But we're not here to disagree about it. We absolutely support that you should do it again.
Well, I need to request that the waiver be granted, and I would like to know that.
The waiver, that request has gone to the Commissioner's office and it was denied. Nobody gets a waiver of the fee. I've had research institutions.
So you're just telling me that I can reapply, but I'm gonna get the same result. That doesn't move us forward at all. What I'm trying to do is move us forward from
I can tell you that-
$1,335 to somewhere in between, maybe some negotiated point where we can agree, but the $1,335 includes copies. And if that's what your estimate is based on, which it says it is, then I do want copies. So that's a lot more work than what I originally
Can I ask
requested.
you just a clarifying question? So your request was for the entire office budget, are you, that includes program, that's a huge
A list of
ask
all payments.
for the-
How many checks do you issue in a year?
Oh, thousands.
And there's a computer list of that.
But it's
somewhere.
not in one place, because some of it, so you do
So you call
want
the IT guys up and you say, I want a list of all payments made last year.
okay.
Because wait a minute, you have to provide this list to the auditors once a year anyway.
I'm Mr. Gateman, I'm gonna say that you are absolutely welcome to make requests.
I heard that.
And I'm not done, please, but we talked about being friendly. You can clarify in greater detail your request, and we would welcome that. If you want something particular, put it in writing so we can look at it. And then we will do our best, because we want transparency for you.
Deb, I did all that previously, and what I got was $1,335 thrown in my face when you know full well I don't have $1,335. So if you really want me to waste the time of the Attorney General's office and your time some more, that's fine. But what we could do is very easily reach agreement to provide the list originally requested.
We have a commitment to pay for the labor that it takes to do this. And that we can't change that. That's the law. So
No, that's an option under the law.
And that's the department.
That is the
department's position is, and we apply it to any and all people. And a waiver was I took the waiver request up to the Commissioner's office and spoke to the General Counsel, and the response was, we do not waive for anyone under any circumstances. I just want you to know that I was very cognizant of the fact that you had limited resources, and I worked very hard with the people who came up with the time request to get it to be the least amount of time.
Okay, I'll waste their time then. That's unfortunate. Because I am going to get the information eventually. You can just decide whether you're going to pay for it now or pay for it later. I need to know what's happened with that MedCap grants, and I need to know what things were said around it, because I got dropped from the stakeholders group like lead weight.
Gee,
And
I saw your name on a list in the past year. When there was an update sent, it was including you. But we both know that, so I know news.
When was the last official meeting of the stakeholders group?
They don't meet.
Why not? So that means that all communications, like setting up Roger's event, which was paid for by MedCaps, took place behind the scenes, out of sight,
That was.
Which is
that was his
contrary-
discussion.
which is
Nothing.
contrary to the Freedom of Access
As I stated when we
Office.
started, we've addressed MedCap. I'm not gonna address it anymore. I have. And we're not gonna argue. I'm not here to argue with you. I'm here to listen to you about the new opportunities you'd like to discuss. And because I wanna hear.
No, you don't.
No, we're not gonna argue. If you wanna talk productively, we can, but I'm not.
That's what I'm trying to talk, is productively.
I'm glad.
Your sarcasm is very transparent.
This is not sarcasm.
It
at
is, of
all.
course it is. Come on, Deb. I've dealt with you before.
You absolutely have.
You know, the way you stole the memory cafes from